Everyone. Today I'm going to kind of pick up where we left off yesterday, but I'm going to backtrack a couple steps. So if you remember, I'm going to bring up the old diagram we had yesterday. We kind of had this setup where we're kind of working in a space where there's three overall repositories. There's the repository that is associated with Plasma Pi. Then there's the fork that you made, and then there's your local repo. So I'm going to back up. And so yesterday we created a demo here, but instead of doing everything we did yesterday with a demo, I'm going to go ahead and use the repo that's associated with this Hack Week. So the Hack Week repo. So the idea is by the time I'm done with my session, you should all have a local copy of the Hack Week repo on your own computers, which will allow you to start adding your own functionality and pushing it up to GitHub yourself. All right. Any questions before I go on? Or is there anything you want me to re-highlight on this kind of diagram? All righty. So if you go to GitHub github.com/plasmapi, this will take you to Plasma Pi's organization. Okay, in here we have the Hack Week repo pin. So this is the repository that will be associated with this week. This is the one that has the resources directory in it. So if you go in there, okay, if you haven't done it already, go ahead and click fork up here. So you click fork, and it's wanting me, so it pops up this dialog, which is which is the settings for you to create the fork in your own account. So it's making a copy of the Plasma Pi one into your account. So in this case, this drop down dialog here should be your own personal account, and then this name will be the same as the Hack Week repo. Mine's a little different because I already have a fork. So once you get through that process, you're right, it does.
I noticed that for a while.
All right, we can go fix that real quick. This was, so what I did here is I went back to the main repo. Up here I have a little settings dialog, so I'll just increment this. So this is the same repo we used for last year, but last year's repo is sitting on a different branch. So this is one of the benefits of version control. We don't have to scrap everything we did last year. What we did last year is sitting on a different branch. And we'll do the same thing this year. So once this year's over, we'll dedicate its own branch. And so when we come back and do the 2023 repo, everyone will still be working in main, but we won't delete the 2022 stuff. It will exist in its own branch still. All righty. So if you have, so you've done your fork. So if you go to your account, so I just drop down and I went to your repositories. So that's going to my personal account, and you go to Hack Week. You should find it in there. And now you have a Hack Week. So actually, you'll notice my fork does not look like Plasma Pi's main. So Plasma Pi's main has all this additional stuff in it, and my main does not. Now your main should look exactly like Plasma Pi's. The reason why mine doesn't is it's out of date. It still has the 2021 stuff in it. This is a result of my workflow, which is something that Will and I were touching on a little bit at the end of yesterday. So don't be discouraged that the two look differently. All right, any questions?
Does everyone have a GitHub account, or do we need to give people a couple of minutes to get them set up?
That's a good question.
I'm working on an account and I'm probably not alone.
Okay. Then let's give it a pause.
Survey time.
Yep, I was just gonna say. Okay, I'll make a quick poll right now. Good call. I didn't even think about that. All right. Whoops. You don't want to see that.
We should just have one option. Have you made, do you have a working account and then people click on it as they finish making their account? That way we would know when everyone is done.
All right. Sounds good. You said one option? I don't know if I can just have one option. Yes. Okay, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to have you made a Git count? No, I don't plan to. All right. So I'm making a poll that has, have you made a GitHub account? There's two answers, yes or no, I don't plan to. So if you haven't made your GitHub account and you're in the process, wait until you're done making a GitHub account to answer the poll. All right, GitHub account. Okay, launching the poll. And if you go, oops, we already have it open. So if you go back to the resources directory, and you go down to the README, there should be, where are you? Create a free personal GitHub account. So that should link you to GitHub. And if you don't have a GitHub account, this will look differently and give you the prompts to go ahead with it.
Eric, hi, this
Yeah.
is Dan. You know, I went through the, I mean, it only takes a minute to create a GitHub account, theoretically, and I did that, but I never received a verification email, and it doesn't proceed after the verification of, you know, pick the spiral galaxy thing, make sure your computer. Anyway, I don't know what's going on, so I submitted a support ticket to GitHub to see if I could get an account created, and I'm still waiting on that.
Did you use usually they're fairly quick about it. Usually if I have a delayed email, I either type my email in incorrectly, or I have a weird scenario where I have one Gmail, but several emails. So all my emails go to my Gmail. And sometimes those don't feed quickly.
Oh, and there's a chance it went into the spam folder.
Yeah, I've done all those things. I've checked. I've done all that. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's a mystery to me. I've never been able to not register for a free account on a website. That's usually no brainer. So anyway.
Do you have a Microsoft account?
I believe so.
If you have a Microsoft account, you might be able to directly use that.
Yeah, I could, but I'd probably rather not do it because I only have a Microsoft account because I have Word, but I have a Mac, so yeah, I don't really use my Microsoft account.
No, that's fine. Because Microsoft did buy GitHub 4 years ago now, 5 years ago, something along that lines, and so their ecosystems are blended to some degree.
Yeah, I'm looking in my trash. I mean, I submitted this request day before yesterday, and I haven't heard yet from them, only that they've received it. That's all. Oddly, yeah, I don't know what that is about. Yeah, so nothing yet from support. So I'm still trying to get an account. So yeah, I'm just letting you know that neither one of the poll answers apply.
Okay,
so that's all.
Okay.
But I'll catch up. You know, this is sort of a long-term effort. So this is just one of those things that we're going to learn as we go along. So.
All right, sounds good. We'll still be here, so we can answer questions as you get online.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
When Microsoft release an update for GitHub called long haul, that's when I think it's time to stop using GitHub.
All righty, I think okay, I think we got most people have responded, so if you're not ready, please say so in the chat. Otherwise, I'm gonna continue on.
I think you should move on here because I'll do during the demo, I'll do this again. Like I'll
Okay.
from Plasma Pi, I'll fork into in my account. That's what I held off. I was saying I held off this morning.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Then I'll continue on going. So, all right. So we're at the stage right now where the Hack Week, there's a Hack Week repo here on the Plasma Pi account, and you've just forked your own copy. So there's a Hack Week version sitting here in your account as well. So the goal now is to clone your fork down to your local copy, because you don't, as I mentioned yesterday, you really don't do any code work up in Plasma Pi itself, or up in GitHub, I should say. GitHub is kind of the collaboration space where you keep your work and you share your work and you discuss your work and you discuss plans on work, but it's not really where you do your actual coding. That's all local. So we want to bring a local copy down, or we want to clone, the terminology is clone your GitHub copy to a local copy. So I'm going to come back to PyCharm, and in this case, I'll go git clone. I think you can also do.
You still have your slide up, and we're not seeing PyCharm.
No, that's weird. How about now? No.
No, we see only your browser.
No, that's weird.
Did you share a window instead of desktop?
No, I shared a portion of the screen, so you should be
Oh.
seeing it. All right, no PyCharm still?
Nope.
Okay.
I want to just stop sharing and start sharing again.
Yeah, I will. All right. Are you right? Okay. So I take that back. It looks like I did accidentally just share the window. Okay, give me a second.
Knew it.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that.
I was much relieved to hear that it was not only me that could not see the screen that you were
All right.
on.
So you can see PyCharm now.
Right.
Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, so you can go git clone. And so that's going to be the process to clone. I believe you can also go file, new project, Python. Can we do it from? Well, maybe you can't do it from here. I thought you could do it from here. Nope. I thought I could do it from here, but it doesn't look like it. So you'll want to go git clone. Okay, so you do git clone, and this dialog pops up. Now you'll want to have, okay, I'm going to come back a little bit. So if you're in a PyCharm and you go to settings, and if you search GitHub, okay, you go to version control systems and you'll have this dialog box. Okay, I've already added my GitHub account here. You'll want to do the same thing. So if you click add, one option is to log in via GitHub, and it'll take you to GitHub to log in. You authorize and you go in. Sometimes this doesn't work. And if that's the case, you want to cancel. You want to log in with a token instead. And so you get this little dialog that pops up like this. Okay. And in that case, so you get this dialog box and you go back to your web browser and you go back to your own personal GitHub account and you go to settings. Okay. And you scroll down until you see developer settings. Okay. You click on developer settings and you on the sidebar, then you go down to the personal access tokens. In here, you click generate new token. Okay. This is something you don't want to share anyone because anybody who has this will be able to log into or be able to interact with your own account. So you hit generate token and it will generate a token. You can choose how long you want it to exist for. So it can expire. You name your token. And if you go back to PyCharm, it'll tell you that to get your access token, you need to allow repo, gist, reading org, and workflow. Okay. So if you come back to your account, you want to access repo. You want to give access to repo. You want to give access to read org. You want to give access to workflow and gist. I think those were the four that I was asking for: repo, gist, read org, and workflow. Yes. Okay. All right, you do all that and you go generate token. Okay. And it generates a token. So I'm going to do this. You do this, it generates a token, and then you'll get, so you generate demo. You generate a token and it will give you this token here. And you want to copy this token, the one that you generated, and paste it right here and go add account. And that'll give you authorization. That'll give PyCharm authorization to access your GitHub account. Okay. But like I said, don't share it because then other people can get in. Okay, I'm going to take a pause. Are there any questions?
I wanted to check to see if my PyCharm is using tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how to check that off the top of your head?
No, I don't think you can tell after you signed in, because this is the only indication you have. The only other way you can tell is if you go to your GitHub account and see, I've named it. So I have a GitHub token for the PyCharm I have on my Mac, and this is the GitHub token that I have for. Oh, looks like I'm actually using this this one for both my Mac and my Windows machine.
There's another question in the
Yeah.
chat. Is it possible to put more than one GitHub account?
If they're all okay, so more than one GitHub account or more than one token for the same GitHub account?
I believe it is more than different accounts. Yeah.
Different accounts. I have never tried it, but I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to. Because they give you in PyCharm, they give you the ability to add multiple GitHub accounts. It doesn't restrict you after one.
I believe in VS Code, you can't add more than one at a time. But changing between accounts is easy. So at a time, you will just have one, but you can change between different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Eric, I confirmed just to put that out there, you see how you have Git and GitHub? I'm not using GitHub personally. I'm using Git,
Mm-hmm.
and that connects to that. It's auto detecting my version of Git, and so I'm using access privileges through Git, not GitHub, and it pushes back to remote.
So that
as a-
that will probably touch on what you and Nick do after I finish up. So they're going to show you how to set up SSH authorization within your Git. And so because of that, that's why I'm assuming he has privileges without signing into GitHub, because he's already given privileges to Git, which PyCharm is using to send stuff up.
Yeah, I was trying to figure it out because I remember I used to use tokens at one point, and it stopped, and I didn't really think too hard about why.
Yeah, I think it was about 2 years ago now, GitHub completely changed their authentication process, and it threw a lot of people for a loop. All righty. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go git clone. So I get this dialog box that pops up, and I want to specifically look for the things that I have in my account. And I specifically want to look for the hack week. So I search hack week. So you notice I actually have 2 hack weeks here. I have this one, and then I have this Plasma Pi one. This is because currently GitHub knows about my personal account and the Plasma Pi account. So that's why I see 2. My expectation is that you will only see the hack week repo. And that's the one you want. You want the one that doesn't have a name before. So you don't want Plasma Pi hack week. You just want hack week. Okay. And I'm going to select where to put this. So I want to put this, I'm going to go back to my desktop into the hack demos. And in here, I'm going to go okay. And I'm going to create the hack week repo. So I selected which repo I want. And then in here, I'm specifying that I want to create a hack week directory and thus repo in this hack week demos folder that I have left over from yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and click clone. Whoops. Test. So now if you go back to your trust projects, this window. So that's just replacing my current window with the hack week repo. Okay, so if you go back to your whatever file explorer you have, and you go back to the hack demos, you'll now have your hack week repo in there, and it's fully populated with what was in your account. Okay. Again, mine currently looks a little differently because my main is out of date with Plasma Pi's main. Okay. Okie dokie. Okay, so now that you have a local copy, one of the next things to do is to add remotes. So the remote terminology is you got your local, and remote is anything that basically exists up in the cloud. So your own fork is a remote. Plasma Pi would be remote. Any other copies that you link up that exist in GitHub would be called remote. So you can have more than one remote. Generally, you'll just have 2, the one for your fork and the one for the project that you forked. Okay. You only have more if you start becoming a maintainer and you have to start collaborating with more people, but We don't have to worry about that at the moment. So if I go back to PyCharm and you go Git, you can come down here and go Manage Remotes. You click on Manage Remotes, and right now you can see that I have one remote here. Currently it's called Origin, and it's pointing to my the Hack Week repo in my GitHub account. Okay. Same thing, if you come down here to the bottom right corner and you click on main, this comes out with a kind of little version control dialog box. And right now what you see here is here's all my local stuff. So locally, I only have one branch called main, and it's pointing to Origin main. And if you remember, when I looked at my remotes, Origin is referring to my fork copy. So this is telling me that my local main is synced up or pointing to my the main branch in my forked copy. Okay. Everything you see down here, these are all the branches that exist in my fork that don't exist on my local machine. Okay. So I'm going to introduce a little bit of my workflow here. If I go to Manage Remotes, this name you have here can be anything you want. But as I said, kind of learning and managing Git can be a little frustrating at times because there's kind of, I like to refer to them as a ton of hidden connections. There's no nice big picture of what's going on. So it's kind of hard to remember this is here, this is there, this is here, this is there. And so I like to choose a naming scheme that helps me remember just by seeing the name. So what I tend to do when I have a forked copy, I like to name this underscore forked, okay, or underscore fork, okay. So this means I put the underscore on it under it because I use that to indicate to me that this is one of the important ones. This is either going to be my version or it's going to be the version that I forked from. So these are the two most important ones to me. So I put them with an underscore to highlight them right off the bat. On GitHub, okay, give me a second and I'll try and pull that up. So I'm going to just rename this as fork GitHub. I'll just rename this as fork instead of origin. I go, okay. Now there's a question on how to do this on GitHub desktop. GitHub desktop. All right, if I do GitHub desktop, as of right now, I don't have my Hack Week repo in here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a local repo since I've already created it. So I'm going to navigate to where I have this located. So I have it on my desktop in the Hack Demos Hack Week. So I'm going to select that. And as before, when we did this yesterday, it was asking us to, I can't remember the terminology. It was asking us if we wanted to make it a repo, but this thing it recognizes that this directory is already under version control. So when I add it, it's just going to add it.
It was create.
Huh?
Create was the terminology yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Will. All right, so now we're here. So we're in the Hack Week repository, and it automatically knows about all my branches because I've used PyCharm to set up this remote. And so even though I'm using another application, this application is still reading the same Git info. So what I do on PyCharm, GitHub Desktop should recognize it. What I do on GitHub Desktop, PyCharm should recognize it because they're all both editing the same .git files, all the same configuration files in this .git directory. Okay, so this will allow you to switch between GitHub Desktop, PyCharm, VS Code. Now, do I recommend repeatedly switching between those or command line? Not necessarily, because as I stated yesterday, GUIs are just a wrapper on Git, and no GUI is ever going to perfectly wrap the stuff underneath. So all the basic stuff should work seamlessly, but if you do it too much, you'll probably run into a bug somewhere. So if you make a change one GUI, take a little pause, let the other one update, and then you can go back to it. Okay, so remotes, repository, do they have remotes in here? Branch. So I've actually never done it, so I'm kind of options.
Eric,
Yeah.
Jerome brought up an interesting question. I don't want to take us too far off topic just yet.
Yeah.
But I do, it's actually something I do care about, which is privacy.
Yep.
I don't know when's a good time to talk about it, but I just wanted to raise that. Well, Jerome raised it and I agree with him.
I think that has to be personal choice. I mean, that I think that's a bigger topic of discussion on the way our society works today. If you share anything, if you have anything that's free, okay, you are the data. So if you give them something, they will scrape the data from you. That's unfortunately the society we live in today.
It is potentially a good discussion topic, though. Not right now, obviously.
I agree. But I would state that any application you use will do that. If you use Git command line, that probably won't do it. I can't say that for sure. But if you're going to use any GUI, then I would almost certainly assume that it does it. And that's a general rule for any account you make for anything these days.
Wasn't it Steve Jobs who said if you don't know what the product is, it's probably you? Something like that.
You are
Yeah.
the product.
Yeah. Yeah. Could they steal your data? I don't want to say too much about it because I don't know what's going on. I will say that if you're going to talk about personal data, will they take it and use it? My guess is yes. If you're going to talk about your code, for PyCharm, for Plasma Pi, I don't worry about it too much because it's open source. Anybody can see it. Anybody can get it. And it's under a license.
Yeah, but I was looking at a discussion on an earlier thread with Ramiz. He recommended using GitHub Copilot. And I was just reading recently about GitHub Copilot. That's been closed down. Basically, it's become a proprietary product of Microsoft. So these, to me, these are good discussion points because I actually have a concern. I don't have a strong opinion. Yeah.
It also depends on what you chose the first time you downloaded PyCharm. I'm guessing because I just downloaded PyCharm. I'm used to using Spider, and it asked me if they wanted me to send some of the data I have to third parties for statistical purposes. So I think that's a big part of it. If somebody just clicked yes, just going through the buttons of installing, my guess is there's a lot of data going to everybody. Yeah,
and I would extend that for any kind of account you create these days. Almost any account you'll make are required by law these days. At least that's the case in California. Do you want to share your data? Will you allow us to share your data with third-party associates? And
exactly,
personally,
yeah.
Yeah, personally, I always check no. I restrict the sharing as much as I can. So that is a good point. Don't go just clicking through everything blindly. Make sure you choose the settings you want. All right, so I'm doing a quick Google search about remotes in GitHub Desktop. And I cannot see. I do not see a keep going. I do not see any documentation about setting up multiple remotes, but I'm going to put into the chat a link to the GitHub Desktop documentation. So I apologize, I can't show how to manage remotes in GitHub Desktop.
I think all you need to know is to add when you go on, sorry for cutting out. When you go on ads repository, you can add a local one, right? You could also just clone one from, because even if you have GitHub Desktop, sometimes it's not linked to your GitHub account. So you have to link them, and then you can clone whatever you have there.
Sure, you can clone. The idea is, though, you don't want to have two different clones, one for different remotes. You want to have one clone that knows about both remotes.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure, but I think that's what it does, because when I look up, like if I go on Finder and I search for Plasma Pi, there's no Plasma Pi or Hack Week repository, or like there's no Plasma Pi or Hack Week folder on my laptop, you know. I can't find any. So my guess that's remote. I'm not sure.
Are you talking about, will you be willing to share your screen to show us what you're talking about?
If that's not a problem. Okay, let me see.
Okay,
So,
give me a second.
Eric,
Yeah.
if you go to repository on top, in the GitHub Desktop, yeah, and then go to settings, repository settings, it gives you remote, but there is only option for one remote.
Okay, so you only have an option for one remote.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so okay, looks like this. So you might be able to do the sloppy thing of switching this back and forth. I would not recommend that, but it might be an option. I'm curious if you set up multiple remotes using the command line, if GitHub Desktop would recognize it. Anyway, so if you can't set up multiple remotes and you want to make sure that you keep getting updates from Plasma Pi, what you're going to have to do is actually merge. So here, so I showed you, so I'm in my GitHub account. So this sorry, I'm not in my GitHub account. Let's go to my repositories and I'll go to Hack Week. And as I said before, so now I'm sitting in my forked copy, but my forked copy looks nothing like Plasma Pi's copy. So if I'm not doing this locally and I'm only doing this on GitHub, I can update my main branch through a pull request. So I can do a contribute. Maybe I have to do it from their side. They have a fetch upstream now. So if you do a fetch and merge, that should do it all in one step. So I'm in my Plasma Pi account in my fork copy of the hack week, which is pointing to the original Plasma Pi hack week. My main, as you can see, is definitely out of sync with Plasma Pi's main. Okay, so what I can do here is I can do fetch upstream, and if I do fetch and merge, that should bring in, and it did, everything from Plasma Pi's account. So now my main, so I'm still in my account in the hack week repo, and I'm still in my main, and now my main matches GitHub's main, or sorry, Plasma Pi's main. Okay, so now those two are resynced. So the thing is, you have to do this step manually. So you're only working with one remote. This is what you're going to have to do, is every now and then come here and update the main in your own fork.
Eric, can you
Yes.
then show us how to pull that into PyCharm?
Yep,
Now
that was
we
going to be my next step.
account. Oh, excellent. Sorry.
Yes.
The foreshadow.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So now if I come down to PyCharm, okay, in PyCharm, you can do the same thing. You can do a git fetch here. So I'm going to do it with this kind of dialog window. So you see the same kind of hollowed out blue arrow. That's the same kind of hollowed out blue arrow in the drop down menu. So if I go main, I come here and I click fetch. And what that's going to do is GitHub is going to go out and ping all my remotes and see if there are any updates. And you can now see on my local, which is synced to my fork main, I now have a little blue arrow that is telling me that what is up in GitHub is ahead of what I have locally. If you see a little green arrow pointing the other way, that means I have changes in my local copy that don't exist in GitHub. So now I can do, from here, I can click on it and it comes up with the dialog box, and I can go update. You can also hit the same kind of down blue arrow up here in the corner. So if I go update, so before I go ahead and do that, you can see how my local repo is still pointing to all that old stuff. So it's way out of date. In fact, if I go to, let's see if this will show it. If I go to my log, we'll show my, here is where my fork is, and we'll show my main on here too. Can I select both? Oh, I can't get both. It's so far out of date, I can't get both on it right now. Oh, sorry, I can't get both comparison, but basically what's up in GitHub is way ahead of what I have locally. So I'm going to go ahead and back to this dialog box. I'm going to go main, and I'm going to go update. You give it a minute or a few seconds. Okay, it's pulling all the changes. So there are 74 files updated with 112 commits. So everything, this is all the stuff that was brought in. And now you can see how the project tree is completely updated. So now my local copy matches the main copy I have in my fork.
There's a question in chat.
Mm-hmm.
So Ricky is trying to do this in VS Code using fetch, and it gives two options, prune and prune tags. Do you know what they are?
I'm unfamiliar with those. Do either you or Will know about those?
I always use command line for this.
I think it depends. I think it's related to how much of the history that it takes with you. So I'll take a look into this and put it in the chat.
Yeah, we'll dig into it and let you know. Okay. One of the nice things about PyCharm is you can actually have multiple remotes. So if I go back to manage remotes, well, it figured it out on its own. I was going to add it manually, but it figured it out on its own. I think it's because I did when I did the fetch and it looked up to GitHub, it figured all that stuff out. So I'm going to delete this real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new one. So to make my life easier, I'm going to copy this URL, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add a new remote, paste the URL copied, and I know I'm going to replace my account name with PlasmaPi because that's where the original one is. And I will usually call this something like _ PlasmaPi. Again, these are, in my mind, these are the two most important remotes. They're the original remote repo, which is the one that's in PlasmaPi, and then my fork copy. So the way I always use this is _fork is the one that was forked, and _name is what was the actual original origin for the repo. And I click OK. So now Git has both of these remotes registered, and PyCharm knows about them. So if I go back to main, if I go back to this little dialog box, you can see I only see fork here yet. So I've added this new remote, but I don't see anything about that remote here. It's because I haven't fetched yet. So I go ahead and fetch, and now it's going to go out and inspect all my remotes. And so this should update. And it's going to make me look like an 8. There we go. I had to just give it a second. Whoops. So now I see all the branches that exist on PlasmaPi. Now, generally what will happen is these branches are protected, so I can't push changes to them, but I can create new branches from them. So what I can do, this is how I generally work, since I don't keep my fork main updated usually. If I'm working on a new idea, I create a branch directly from PlasmaPi's main. Another thing I like to do is I will go, so I can click here and I can go new branch, and I will call this main from PlasmaPi. I can go ahead and I can go create that. And so now I have this main sitting on my locally that I know is supposed to be synced up with PlasmaPi. As of right now, it's not. You can see how my normal main is pointing to my fork and main, but there's no notes about that for my main from PlasmaPi because it's not synced up yet. You don't have the PlasmaPi branch. Have you added it as an additional remote yet? So if you go, that PlasmaPi remote won't show up until you go ahead and add this additional remote.
I'm interested, if you had asked earlier, Eric, if you could have multiple branches managed through the command line Git. And I'm interested to know if Nick, because he uses your same development approach, right? Creates a fork, and then manages the branches on the fork, and then does a pull request back to the PlasmaPi remote.
Right. So I think that will be what David and I will talk about after this. Oh, and looking at the time, we probably should take a break.
Yeah, I want to do
5 minutes.
I want to do one more thing, and then I will be done with my section. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So as I was saying, this main from PlasmaPi branch that I made is not pointing to any remote right now. So what I do, unfortunately, this is one of the wrapper features that doesn't exist in PyCharm. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to manually add the Plasma Pi remote to this branch. So if you go to your terminal and if you go and you're sitting in the Hack Week folder, you do git branch minus VV. So that's just going to give you more information about all your branches. And you'll see that locally I have 2 branches, main and main from Plasma Pi. Main is pointing to fork main, whereas main from Plasma Pi is pointing to no one. So I'm going to do git branch. So I'm currently sitting in main from Plasma Pi. I'm going to do git branch. I'm going to go -- set up set upstream -2 equals the new remote, the Plasma Pi remote I want. So underscore Plasma Pi / the branch I want to connect to, main. So this is going to set my set the upstream of my main from Plasma Pi to the remotes Plasma Pi main. Okay, so that's telling Git and PyCharm that these 2 locations are supposed to be synced with each other. So if any one gets out of date with the other one, it will tell me. It'll tell me my local one is ahead, or it'll tell me my remote is ahead. And that's my cue to get them updated. So I go enter and I go up arrow, go back to git branch minus VV. And you'll now see that this local main from Plasma Pi is now pointing to the Plasma Pi's main. And you'll see that same update happen in the dialog box. So now it's pointing to main. So if Plasma Pi's main ever updates, I will get a notification locally that it has done so. All right, I'm going to wrap up here since we're just getting to the hour and it's about ready for a 10-minute break. So I will, you're welcome. Thank you for hanging in there. I will stick around if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll let you all go for, we'll reconvene 10 minutes past the hour. All right. Thank you. Like I said, I'll stay here, so feel free to ask any questions during the break if you want to.
So just to summarize, you got the initial Hack Week forked and then you clone it in your repository, like local folder. And then you added a remote.
Sorry, repeat that.
So you fork the Hack Week repo in your own account, and then you clone it on your local system.
Yeah, so as you're talking, let me bring up the diagram.
Right.
So we're on Plasma Pi, and so we forked it over here. Yes.
And then you clone it on your local repo.
Yep.
And then so remote, you connected it to both your personal your personal forked repository as well as the main Plasma Pi repository.
Yeah, so essentially when I did the cloning, this remote connection was automatically made.
Okay.
Okay, and then what you saw me do at the end is I manually added this connection.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So in that you just need to go to the so you need to provide the link to the actual Plasma Pi repo for that?
Yes, because I'm adding it manually. Yes, I have to tell it where to look.
Okay, and you also gave it a custom name, right?
Yes, this is the one that I had named underscore Plasma Pi.
The underscore Plasma Pi, that was to give it a custom name, or
yes,
what was that? Okay.
Because as I was saying, the names you choose for your remotes is completely arbitrary. You can choose whatever you want. The traditional lexicon is origin upstream, and those have never been explicit enough for me. And so the convention I personally use is in my mind, I think there's two primary, the two most important repositories are the original repository where the main set of code is housed, and the fork that I'm working from. So those two most important repositories, I give the underscore. And so because I can have 10, 15 remotes when I'm working with collaborators doing code review and things like that. And so the two most important ones, I put a leading underscore. I think this stems from Python's convention, because you'll often see in Python, when they name variables, you'll see variables that have a single leading underscore or a double leading underscore. In Python, there's no real such thing as a private variable, but the leading underscore is an indication to all users and contributors that this functionality or this variable is meant to be used internally only. There's no restrictions on changing it, but if you do, you may break stuff. So this is more important than just a normal variable. And a variable that has a leading double underscore is even more important, and you shouldn't be touching it, kind of thing. So that's kind of where this nomenclature comes from, this lexicon that comes from in my use. These are the important ones, so I'm going to put that leading underscore on them. The one that's actually named is the one that is the repository that originally had that started the code, and then the fork is the fork. Sorry, that was long and rambling. Did that answer the question, Ramiz?
Oh yeah. It was I knew half of it, but it also helped me clarify things. So yes.
So, and then back to the diagram to re-emphasize, in Plasma Pi, we generally protect our branches here. So only a handful of people can actually write to a repository. The reason is you can have hundreds and thousands of contributors, and we want to be able to keep the repository clean. We want it, so it helps us manage the repository if we don't have people pushing directly to it. And so we generally protect it. So you can't push changes up to it, but you can pull changes from it. In fact, even Nick and I, when we contribute code to Plasma Pi, we first push it up to our own forked copy, and then we go through a pull request process to merge our code in. So neither Nick or I have personal branches on Plasma Pi either.
So once in a while, I have made a mistake where I accidentally push something to the main branch. And
then I shame him in the next community meeting.
Nah, it's fine.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
We all
Also,
make mistakes.
Did you have the bell?
No, but I need to start doing that now.
Eric, I
I'm
think
gonna go
we need
buy
to
a bell
revisit the
day.
code of conduct here. No shaming of developers allowed.
Yeah, we all understand when mistakes happen. And
It's all out of love.
the good thing about like open source development is that, and with Git and GitHub, is that if we make a mistake, then there are ways for us to fix it.
Mhm.
And so the mistakes are chances to learn, chances to grow. And when we do make a mistake, that's often like a sign that maybe we could change the way that we're doing things to be a bit
Yeah.
different. So chance to learn.
we had one of these happen in the last Plasma release. I made the mistake of merging your pull request as a squash merge, and therefore we lost our whole tags. We lost our whole versioning scheme. So the longer you do this, you're not immune to errors. We all still have errors. That's one of the fantastic things about version control. You have breadcrumbs along the way. So when you have an error, you can go back to an old breadcrumb. So that's essentially what happened. I accidentally merged a pull request the wrong way, which lost all of our version tags. So basically it looked like we were trying to release a new version of Plasma Pi, which was 081, and it was looking like 07 instead of 081. And so we were able to undo that change and then redo it the proper way, so we have all of our version tags back.
And the reason why it's 0.8.1 and not 0.8.0 is because of another mistake that I made. But you know, that's how the process goes.
Also, like if you're starting, GitHub can be very confusing. Instead of trying to resolve it, there have been times when I've just deleted everything and copy pasted it, because doing Control-Z sometimes is a lot easier than trying to resolve all the issues on GitHub. So,
If you haven't messed up a branch push or pull at some point, are you even really doing open source development?
yeah. Also to add, everything that Eric has done on PyCharm can be done on VS Code. It's super simple. You just you go to the Git thing and then you can set up remote and everything. So you can set up multiple remotes in VS Code, just not through GitHub Desktop.
So there are a few questions in the chat, so I'm trying to read through them. So I'm going to start with the first one by Xuan. To confirm, the demonstration with connecting the original Plasma Pi Hack Week remote is not available via GitHub Desktop, right? Yes, that is not available with GitHub Desktop. When we get them back from the break, Nick will show how to do that using the command line. The other option is you just don't do that, and you want to make sure that you routinely do the step. So if you're in your own fork, routinely do the step of fetch upstream. I wonder if I don't know if this is an avenue we want to explore, Nick. I wonder if there's a way to set up a GitHub action such that everyone's upstreams could automatically be updated when we update our main. I like that idea and I hate it at the same time.
I totally prefer to work that way. So if it's possible, I would love it.
The reason why I hate it is a lot of new contributors, they're still trying to understand it. So the branch concept is not quite there yet. And so people will often work on their main. And so we're always changing their main. We're affecting we have the chance of affecting their current work. That's why I hate it. I like it because it stays up.
But that'll teach them. They'll learn quickly.
That's a very, very mean way to teach that.
Yeah.
I think like there's in software engineering, there's a lot of discussion about user experience, but there's also developer experience. And that, like, since Plasma Pi is a community where we're like blurring between user and developer, it's really important that the code contribution process be not too bad, I guess. To be
the thing that I've been thinking about, and I've been thinking about it privately, so I'm not looking to influence anybody else on how their workflow is, but I use my difference from main is very important to me. My git log is all referenced to difference to main. And if my git log looks at my underscore forks instead of my underscore Plasma Pi, I feel like I've lost understanding of what's really happening. And what I care about is, in large part, what I care about personally is my branch compared to _main from _plasma pi. Not underscore. So essentially what happens is, if we don't have a simple way of doing it, it pushes the burden on me to basically keep going back and forth and maintaining synchronicity.
That's true, but we also have to balance the idea, as I'm sure everyone's becoming readily aware of, is just like how IDEs is very much a personal choice, workflow is very much a personal choice. So as Plasma Pi maintainers, we have to realize there's multiple ways that people do workflows, and we have to be careful about the things that we implement to make sure we don't tread on too many people's toes. Like, if we implement it for the way you do, it may adversely affect someone else. So it's about balancing, and we want to get as close to perfect as we can, but you're never going to get there.
Yeah, that to me, that's a statement, and it's a reasonable statement. But the whole ecosystem of Git is based on, like, even Git diff is based on an understanding of what the main branch is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do a Git diff without synchronicity, that Git diff is meaningless, because you've basically done a Git diff between a main branch that you're not even maintaining. Like, thinking about the workflow, it's not even relevant in a workflow that isn't maintaining that main branch. Now, you can specify 2 different remotes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I have the 2 different remote approach that I do, because I agree with you. And when I first started doing this, I tried to keep my fork main up to date, and I realized for me it was fruitless, because it was always out of date. So I just stopped looking at my main, and I just started looking at Plasma Pi's main, and I made all my branches and all my workflow from Plasma Pi main, and I just completely ignored my fork main.
So when you go through and you do your differences in files in PyCharm, you'll manually set what you're comparing.
So
all
for
the
example,
default
you're
basically bypassing.
Yeah, so what I do locally is I will go, typically what I'll do, I have this main from Plasma Pi, so I know it's linked to the Plasma Pi main, and I'll create a new branch from here, and I'll go idea A, okay? And then I'll go, I think I remember this syntax issue still here. I'll go down to the bottom of the README, and it still has 2 spaces at the bottom of the README. It should only have 1 space on it. Okay, so I've made that change. So if I want to compare this to main, I don't go here and compare it to this main. I go here and compare it to this main. Or I go to Plasma Pi's main and I compare it here. Compare with idea A.
Yeah, that's very IDE centric.
Yeah.
And is that?
Yeah.
But you should be able to do it on the command line too, because you have this main. If you have multiple remotes set up, you have this main pointing to Plasma Pi's main, so you can always. So I'll do the branch again. So now I have this IDE. So you can, even in Git, you can compare this branch to this branch instead.
Why don't you try it?
What
if you
is
just
it?
say git diff, if you just say git diff right now,
Yeah.
without specifying anything, which
Well, I think this might be difficult to do because I think, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I think we're back from the break now.
Yeah.
So.
Also, there was another, sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but there was another question from Andrew.
Yeah.
Is it possible to use GitHub and all other programs to load all free software to my computer and run a job without GitHub?
I mean, that's the traditional workflow. You pip install all your software and you can go use it. The GitHub workflow is useful for contributing, for adding to adding and sharing code bases.
I think those were the only questions, and we can go ahead with the rest of it.
Looks like Ricky has a question. So is it best practice to two remotes, one to your GitHub? So he's asking if it's best practice to have two remotes, one to your fork and one to what I was naming my Plasma Pi. Is it best practice? I don't want to say it's best practice. It's my workflow. And as you might have alluded from the discussions with Will and I have completely different workflows, and our minds perceive it a little differently.
Well, I would even go so far as to say the OMFit community has adopted a different workflow than the Plasma Pi community, because the OMFit community, we have 270 some odd branches. We do branch management, and everybody, basically, and we'll go and prune the branches periodically. When a branch is dead, we'll prune them. So I think I would go so far as to say, it's clear to me that there's a difference in community. At OMFit, we started out with a forked approach where, you fork and develop branches on your forks repo, and the community has moved back to the main branch, or the main repository. So that I would say it is community, and that's why I'm engaged in this discussion, because it is a community, and that's how this community has evolved so far.
So to expand on Will's comment that there's these two different approaches that are both valid. From my experience so far, the approach that Plasma Pi has taken has been generally the approach that you see a lot with open source packages on GitHub. The approach that Will is explaining with OMFit is more of the approach I see in-house. So you have an in-house collaboration. That's more of the approach they do. You have a smaller contributor base, and they all contribute to the same repository, and they create their own branches and things like that. So they're both equally valid, but I think the approach that's taken is really influenced by the user base and the potential user base. Clement, I am sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name incorrectly, which I probably am. What is the point of cloning your remote, since you said you ignore it? It's because I don't ignore my remote. I just ignore the main branch in my remote, because whenever I'm working on new code, I push that new code to my remote. So if I bring back my diagram, if I create a new branch in my local copy that I'm developing new functionality on, I don't push that new branch directly to Plasma Pi. Excuse me. I push that new branch to my remote, and then to get it into Plasma Pi, I go through what's called a pull request, which will be highlighted when Nick and David do their demo. So this is the process of review to get it into Plasma Pi. So it's not that I'm ignoring my remote, I'm just ignoring the main branch on my remote, because I'm focusing all my attention on the main branch in Plasma Pi's remote.
I see what you're saying, but then you're ignoring the clone of your remote, as in you never need to pull from your own remote, as far as I understand. So you always pull from Plasma Pi.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that is a good point, Pavel. Before you ever push a change to remote, I'm sure Nick and David will go through this when they do their demo. If you're ever going to push changes to your remote, the best thing to do is do a fetch first to make sure you're not going to clash with anything that's up on the remote. So generally, if there's differences, you want to pull those differences down to your local copy and do the merge conflict like we showed yesterday, so you can resolve any issues between the two, get that updated, and then push it up to the remote.
I just want to jump in here for just for the people, particularly those of you who are just kind of starting out on this. You know, Eric and Will are certainly coming from the point of view of developers and people who've been maintaining this. My hope is when Nick and I do the demo that you can kind of see a version of interfacing with Plasma Pi that is definitely more for people who just want to maybe contribute a piece of their code to the system. And you know, you don't necessarily need to worry as much about a lot of the details that that Eric and Will have just been talking about. So don't get discouraged. Like, if I sort of zoned in and out of all of this because I know that I'm probably not going to be contributing at quite this level, but what I can do is I can add in functionality at some level, and then that functionality can get iterated over and improved by either myself or other members of the community who have a little bit more skill in this. And it's something that, you know, as you kind of get into it, you'll learn how to improve and sort of make it more in line with the way things are written. But I hope that you know, in the demo portion, we can show you that it is actually very straightforward to implement some things. You know, your own code, you have some function that you'd like to you know, bring to the table. It can be done without sort of having all of this background knowledge. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, David. I figured now I'll hand it off to Nick. Sorry, Nick, I took so much of your time.
So I'm gonna share my screen here. I think I'm gonna share my screen. Yes, I am. So I'm going to start from the same thing. We talked about being able to, you know, push and pull from remotes. And one approach to being able, so one of the issues with pushing and pulling to remote is having permissions to be able to communicate. You know, as it's very important that we have security. And one of the ways that Eric has highlighted within, there's a feature where you can create tokens. And I don't want to say which one is you know, the preferred method, but this is another method for maintaining your ability to communicate with remotes. And the nice thing is, so I'm working from the software carpentry. The software carpentry teaching, so you can follow along there and come back to it if you want to revisit this after we're done.
Can you put the link for this particular software carpentry into the chat?
Yep, I'm on it.
I got it. So, all right. So one of the, as opposed to tokens, there's another protocol called Secure Shell Protocol. And as you can see at this line, it's basically a cryptographic network protocol that allows a communication between computers using an otherwise insecure network. I mean, I guess all networks to a certain extent, you know, you travel the internet, there's a possibility for it to be insecure. So the way that it facilitates this is what's called a key pair. And with the key pair, there's basically two keys. A private key that is kept on your personal computer, and there's a public key that is kept on your remote, which I'm going to just, instead of saying remote all the time, I'll probably just say GitHub, knowing full well that there are other places to host your remote repositories. But GitHub's the one that we care about most because that's what a lot of people use. So what will happen is anytime that if you utilize this SSH feature, the two keys, the two computers, the remote and your local, will communicate with each other and verify that you in fact are authorized to push back to your remotes. So to start off with, they tell you to look at, give me 1 second. Where are you? There you are. Okay. The instruction, and hopefully that font is good enough. To look for this .ssh file, because this .ssh, so first of all, the directory I'm in is in my home directory. And in my home directory, you know, I have a lot of files, but I also have hidden files. In particular, one of the hidden files, you know, I'm sure many people are familiar with this, but on Linux, to hide files and directories, if you put a dot in front of the directory, it will be hidden in a Linux shell. So this first thing is just to see, do you already have a .ssh folder? And for this demo, I have deleted my .ssh. So if you run ls-al /.ssh, if you've not ever set up secure shell authorization, then this will return this statement that no, you don't have that directory locally. So then what we're going to do is set up an authorization. So the first thing to do is to generate a key locally. It generates both your private and your public key at the time that you run this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that while everybody is watching. And technically, if you look up here on the web page, I guess you can't copy. I thought you could. Okay, I don't know if, since we're recording, I don't know if there's any danger in putting my email out there, but it's out there. And the first question it'll ask you is enter file in which to save the key. And in this case, you can use the default file name. I've never changed it. You can enter a passphrase if you want an extra layer of security, but typically it's my practice, and I would assume that it's many people's practice, to enter no passphrase, and you enter it again. And then you get this image here, some random art that says that your keys have been created. So if you see that, then you know that you've done it. Now, if we go back and run the ls command, you'll see that you actually have the directory .ssh, and you have both your private key and your public key file. So this private key will always stay on your computer, and you don't move it, you don't change it, you don't do anything. You always leave it there, and you don't delete it. But this public key, you're actually going to put that public key is, you can put that public key elsewhere, which we're going to put it out on GitHub. So the next step, the tutorial has you go through and do SSH-T to GitHub. This is a way to check to see if your keys have been set up. So, and periodically from time to time, you might have a corruption. And I can't really motivate when that will happen or why, but I have, you know, actually, to be honest, sometimes I've had situations where I'm on a new computer and I forgot that I hadn't set it up. So, but from time to time, you might have to check. And so GitHub provides this facility to check your authentication. So if you type SSH-T git at github.com, yeah, you'll see that it asks, are you sure you want to continue connecting? And I said yes. And it tried to add the repository as a list of known hosts. But then GitHub said, nope, permission denied, because it went back and did this authentication, communicating with your current key back to GitHub. And then GitHub sent back a public key, or in this case, it didn't have a public key to send back to my computer. And so authentication was denied. So in this case, I do not have the ability to communicate with GitHub. So now we're going to go ahead and put our public key on GitHub. And so to put your public key on GitHub, sorry, I lost my place here. There we go. So to do that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to list the contents of the public key. So the cat command, Nick demonstrated the cat command yesterday. For those that are unfamiliar, what it does is just list the contents of a file to your standard out. As opposed to having to open the file, you can just, oops. You can just execute the command cat, and you will see that I have this SSH here. All you're going to do, I highlight it and then copy it to buffer. So copying it in traditional Linux, all you have to do is highlight, and that'll bring it into your copy buffer. On Windows machines, it tends to be that you use your right click on your mouse, and that'll copy it to buffer. I don't know what copy to buffer is for a Mac off the top of my head. But either way, get it into your buffer. Control-C often works. And then we'll go to GitHub. Now, when you go to GitHub, you'll see up in the upper right corner a drop-down arrow with your profile. And if you come from your profile down to settings, you'll be able to update your settings. And one of the settings you have are SSH and GPG keys. I don't know what GPG keys are. I've never really worked with them. But the SSH key, you can create a new SSH key, which is what we're going to do. So you click New. The title, I put I don't have a good recommendation, but if anybody wants to pipe in what their recommendation is for a title for that, but for now, Plasma Pi demo key. I can use that because I can go back and delete it after we're done, because I probably don't want to share all this public information. And then I basically control V into this text box here and copied the public key information into the text box. And then I add SSH key. GitHub asks me to confirm my password, and I have my password saved. So I confirm my password. And then now I have a public key on GitHub. Now that public key can communicate through the SSH protocol to my private key. So if we come back to the tutorial, now if we come back and type SSH-T git at GitHub, or you could do up arrow to get it. It says, hi, W. DeShazer, you've successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shell access. And that's fine. That is the end. If you get this message, then you have successfully installed your SSH keys. And from this point forward, you'll be able to push and pull from remotes using the command line. And that is pretty much it for the tutorial.
Hi. Let's see if I'm good to share. Yep. Okay. Hopefully everyone is seeing the slide now as full screen.
Yes.
And then if I do this, it makes something else appear.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Great. So, hi, thanks for coming to my lightning talk. I'll try to keep it quick. So this is a, basically I have made a computer algebra system in Python that can let you input differential equations, such as like the fluid equations. You can do other math with it too, but it's sort of optimized for dealing with linearizing differential equations, finding the dispersion relation, and then solving the dispersion relation. So for right now, I'm just going to go through a little demo. There's more examples online if you go to this link that I have in the top here. You can define some symbols. You can put them together to make equations. You can put those equations together. That's going to tell my code later when we ask it to solve it that they all belong together. Then if you're doing this in, for example, a Jupyter notebook, you'll be able to view the object as nicely printed equations. So here I'm just doing continuity, momentum, and heating equation. Just as a side note, if you print the equations instead of trying to view them, you can get stuff that you can copy paste into a LaTeX document. So, okay, making some equations, you can also linearize those equations. You can assume you have a plane wave solution. So everything's going as e to the I kx minus omega t. I'm also gonna, for this example, simplify it further and say everything in the background is constant. There's no gradients of zeroth order quantities, and that there's no zeroth order velocity. If I do that and simplify a bit, all using the code, this is all happening from the code, just from these commands. I get the linearized form of these equations. So taking those, we can ask my code to solve that system of equations. You can ask it to show its work or hide that work. But if you show your work, you'll get something like this. It tells you which equation it's solving and what it's solving it for, plugs it into the other equations, tries to solve another equation, and keeps going through. Eventually, hopefully you end up with a dispersion relation instead of a crash. But in this case, we get a dispersion relation. We also get this little warning that we have an unnecessary equation. In fact, you don't need the continuity equation in order to get the dispersion relation here. I gave it too much information, but that's okay. This gives you the dispersion relation. The omegas in the bottom here, which is kind of ugly, you can run this function to bring all the omegas up to the top. And then here's what we get. So comparing to the theory, if you do it out by hand, or if you know the dispersion relation for acoustic waves, it's just the sound speed squared. Omega squared is the sound speed squared times k squared. And that is what we ended up getting here. So to keep it short, I'm not going to highlight any more than that. I will just mention that it also supports having subscripts and superscripts, doing a summation notation, substituting numerical values into this, or substituting numpy arrays as those numerical values instead of just single numbers, solving numerically the dispersion relation that you end up getting. And also it can do cross products and curl and break things down into vector components. So thank you. Any questions?
How long did this take you?
So I built this in the fall as a project for a course. So a few months of half of my time.
That's really impressive. This is a very neat package. I like this a lot.
This is really cool. I love it. Yeah.
I'm hoping that, I'm hoping people are interested, and if you want to use it or collaborate on making it better. Right now it can handle slightly more complicated things. I've gotten it to solve like the Farley-Buneman dispersion relation. But at some point it gets too complicated, because really I was trying to make something that worked. So some of my simplification algorithms are like order n squared or worse. So future could be improving that sort of stuff. So if anyone's interested in collaborating on this further, please let me know.
Yeah, this is very nice. And as some people pointed out, maybe very dangerous in the hands of undergraduates who have to show their work in deriving these things.
Oh yeah, I'm okay with that though.
Teachers may not be.
Yeah.
But
I think at some point we have to program the steps that we repeat over and over again so that we can do them faster.
Yeah.
That was sort of my motivation.
Very from an educational standpoint, and when you put the numpy arrays in there, it's actually get values. So yeah, I think this is a great short talk that I think is generated. You'll probably get a lot of follow-up comments and context with it, I hope.
I hope so. Also on the last thing I'll mention is that if you follow the link, I put some instructions for how to download it, and there is a Python notebook with the acoustic wave, and also if you include ions and electrons, that dispersion relation setup. So you can sort of click through it and play with it in that space.
One question I have. Is there any possibility of addition of another terms like collisional of electron neutral and ion neutral collisional terms in this itself, what you have?
Wait, what kind of terms? I'm not sure if I understood.
In the momentum equation or any equation, if we try to put electron neutral and ion neutral collision terms, so is there any?
Yes, you can definitely. So the only real difference is that at the beginning here, you just have to put in a collision term into this momentum, where I define the momentum equation, you just add a collision term.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, was there anybody else that, oh, you have another question?
I was just going to mention, if I think it might be a good idea if the Lightning Talk presenters feel so inclined to actually upload these slides to the resources directory so people can find them after the fact.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm curious when you, I mean, I'm thoroughly impressed by this. There's a lot of hidden work in this that I am just kind of scanning through the code going, what in the world?
There's a lot that I can't show in a short talk, yeah.
But some of the terminology reminds me very, this reminds me a lot of things that go on in SymPy. Did you ever look at SymPy when developing this?
Yes, in fact, my first attempt was going to be to try to use SymPy, but I got really frustrated with how it's difficult to handle vectors, and all the vectors there have to be components, if I understand correctly.
Okay.
But I don't want to force anybody to plug in components for my vectors here, because like anyone who has taken multivariable calculus and worked with these vectors knows the rules for manipulating these things and can do it by hand. So without knowing all the components for the vector. So I sort of wanted this to reflect my understanding of the rules of algebra and calculus. And I considered using SymPy as a starting point, but I ended up getting frustrated to the point where I just sort of built it up from scratch.
Okay, it sounds like a lot of physicists. Okay, I'm just gonna build it myself. But you've come up with something very impressive here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, Eric, when physicists try to do it, it's usually not very good.
Wow.
Yeah, okay.
For this next part, David and I are going to work through the process of making a code contribution, so making a pull request to the Hack Week repository. So Dave is going to be working on his computer. You're there, David, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, we haven't really done this before, so this will be interesting, but at least the plan is to really start from scratch. I'll literally start by going to my GitHub account and forking from the Plasma Pi account. So, you know, we'll walk through. Once we do that, I'll work on coding up a very short version of some type of, well, I think we've settled on the Alphane speed. So I'll basically create an Alphane speed function and go through the whole process of how to get that integrated into the Hack Week repository. And I think what I think what will happen is basically I'll sort of be going along and Nick will be watching and helping me do this. I have nominally done this before, but I'm not a main developer on Plasma Pi, so I sort of only tinker. So there's still a lot of things that I might not do very efficiently yet. So that's why sort of it's a tag team effort here.
And can I add to that for those that are here? I would say do your best to follow along with them, including the point in which he opens a pull request. So you can do it all yourself and have at least gone through it once before we have all of you do your own formulary items. It doesn't matter that we'll have multiple pull requests open for Alphane speed. So we can manage that when the time comes.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe I should go ahead and start sharing my screen.
Awesome. And one thing to build off of what David was saying, that contributing to an open source project is not just contributing code, documentation, and tests. It's also helping out with the community aspects, so organizing events like this one. And so there are a whole bunch of different ways that to be part of the Plasma Pi community and for other open source projects too. All right, David.
And to expand on Nick, I think the most beneficial way to contribute is not necessarily helping with a committee like this or contributing code, but just suggesting code and throwing out bugs, just letting us know what's there and what you would want. That is contributing as well.
Yeah, and really important too. So.
Okay, so the starting point for me, let's say sort of, you know, role playing here, I have this new equation that I figured out called the Alfvén speed, and thought, you know, this would be really useful for my colleagues to have in Plasma Pi. So I have a GitHub account. I am logged into it at the moment, and I would go to Plasma Pi, the Plasma Pi repository, and in this case, I'm going to contribute to the Hack Week repository that we're all going to be contributing to. Obviously, if you were wanting to do this directly onto Plasma Pi in the future, you would select the Plasma Pi repository. But this way, with the Hack Week, we can go through the whole process of implementing new functionality without having to go through the same level of code review and attention to detail that we would if for the actual repository. So this is more like a sandbox that we can kind of go through the whole process without worrying about major changes or needing to fix things later on. So if I'm doing this right, I would go to the Hack Week repository. And now I want to go to fork. That's correct?
Yes.
Nick? Okay, so I don't have any existing forks. I'm going to create a new fork. All right, so Eric did this a little bit, but now sort of walking through this again. I don't have a Hack Week repository this time, so it's just going to be the same name as it was before. This description is the same. You could see that I am in my personal GitHub account. So I'm going to go ahead and create that fork. All right, so now this is Hack Week under my account, D. Schaffner. So I'm going to use, I use Spider as my main IDE, and I think we've decided there is not really any GitHub integration that's useful at the moment. So and even if there was, I like using GUI-based things, so I'm still. Even if there is down the road GitHub integration, I will likely continue to use GitHub Desktop. So the way I would then, referring back to the diagram that Eric is using, I just forked in my remote. So my remote account. Now I'm going to clone this onto my local machine. So I am going to do open. I'm going to go to code. This is all clone, and I'm going to open with GitHub Desktop. And again, Nick, please jump in if I'm doing something sort of out of order here. But I think that this is the right thing to do. So when I click open with GitHub Desktop, it asks if I want to do it. Yes, I do. I already have GitHub Desktop open. And so it brings up, can everyone see now GitHub Desktop? I want to make sure that everyone, that my entire screen is being shared. Yes? Yep. Okay. Okay, so this is within GitHub Desktop, and this is the URL that I'm going to clone. And again, I'm a novice. I don't really have any. I'm just going to sort of click through, assuming that sort of the default settings that are presented to me are fine. So I will clone that. All right. Now let me switch to that repository. Here's a good question. How am I planning to use this fork? So in this case, I would want to contribute to the parent project. I think that's, oh wait, this gets into what Eric was talking about, right? Contributing directly and versus to my own personal fork that then gets, so I'm not really sure.
Correct. In this case with our workflow, if you were to choose the first one, every time you tried to push up to GitHub, you'd be pushing to Plasma Pi and not your own fork.
Right. So I don't want to do that. So
No.
I think in this case, so I want to be, so what I want to do is I'm just making changes to this, to my forked repository. And then you'll see as we go through, once I made the changes on my local machine and I make the changes to my remote, then we'll go through the pull request process. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. So you can see here, it just changes all of the, the default pull requests. I think this is something you can change after the fact. So I would assume this is, again, just something to make things easier for people who don't want to have to go through all the details. So I'm going to click for my own purposes. Okay.
So David, can I point something out real quick?
Sure.
This was a highlight I did just before the break. If you click the down arrow where you see main.
Yeah.
Right now you only see origin. So you're only seeing your own branch right now.
Right.
Now go ahead and click the fetch origin, the kind of refresh mark next to it. So after you do that, see, it pulled in the upstream branches now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how, after you create a repo, you can now see the branches that exist both in your fork and in upstream.
Got it. So I'm still going to want to, I'm still only going to want to push any changes to my origin.
Yeah, and because of the selection you made previously, it should only be pushing to your origin.
Right.
And then to make a little reference for those that are around, when Arian was doing his demo, when he pushed, it wanted to push to Plasma Pi. That's likely because he chose the other option.
Got it. Okay. So that's an important step there. Okay. There's a hand raised.
If I may, are you intending to use the 2021 or the 2022 repository?
Well, the main is a hack week. So that's actually a good point. So all of these other branches are other branches. They're not ones that I'm dealing with. I'm only going to be working on main. But the point is that main is pointing to this repository, D. Schaffner Hack Week. It's not pointing to Plasma Pi Hack Week.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
All right.
Okay. So still good, Nick?
So far, yeah.
Okay. So then the next part would be to actually create something that I would want to contribute. So like I said, yeah.
Before that, you'd want to create a different branch.
All right. So this is actually something that I tend not to do, and that's probably not good practice. So this is basically adding an extra step in sort of the process of getting it into Plasma Pi in general. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I would go to new branch.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's call this, so the branch would be, because I'm specifying a certain project. So maybe I'll call it add alphane speed. So now I know that that's the whole reason this branch exists, is because I want to put in this new functionality of adding in an alphane speed.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm going to create that branch. Oh,
it's good to have a descriptive branch name, because after a while you'll end up having a bunch of different branches
right
you contribute to a project, and being able to distinguish between them. If you have a branch called update, that can be a bit vague. Not that I'm actually mentioning this from my own experiences, but descriptive names in general for this sort of thing are really helpful.
Now, here's an interesting question. So I could publish this branch to GitHub, but I also don't need to, because it can just be branched locally. And this way, you know, for example, like a small change like this, I'll add the alphane speed, and you know, once I'm happy with it, I'm going to merge it into my main, my local main anyway. So what are your thoughts on that? Are there reasons to or not publish this branch on GitHub?
Let's see, I'm not so used to GitHub desktop. The step that I would do from the command line is to create a branch and then push that branch to my own fork. And so you do want to have a step in there where you take the branch you're working on and pushing it to your own fork. So it would be dschaffner/hack week and then a new branch on there.
Right, so presumably that's what publish branch would do. So why don't we go ahead and see what that does?
Yeah, that is what that does.
Okay.
That is what it does, yeah. And I will add that it's often good to routinely push your code up to GitHub, just because then it's a backup.
Right.
Because if you mess something up locally, you have something up on GitHub that you can pull back down.
Right.
And I do want to ask, does that, so my understanding is publishing it to your remote, it is not necessarily publishing it to the world. You still have privacy settings on your remote that you can manage through GitHub.
Right.
Your Git, because as you can see on his GitHub page right now, you have the little public flag next to Hack Week. So that means anybody can see this repo.
Right. So you can manage
know
your
that there's-
privacy. That's because of how he created that branch. He can manage his privacy from here.
I don't know if you can switch a fork to private or not. I know you can. I don't know if you can or not.
David, if you go to settings, you will see an option whether you can make it private or not. Go down. If you don't see it here, then it's not there, but
yeah, they might force you to keep the same public-private status as the repo that you forked from. That's why I'm not sure.
Right. I don't think you can, because if you search for change visibility, that option is dark grayed, which means it's not applicable. So
right, that's what I thought. So that's why I wasn't sure. But anyway, just yeah, you can see that I've added a branch here. Now this branch is on my repository, but if we were to go to the Hack Week, it would not show up in the Plasma Pi version. Okay. So are there any questions before the next step is to actually start coding something simple? All right, so I use Spider, and I am going to open up a new file. And I'm going to save as in my so this is all doing things GUI based. I'm saving this file in, so my GitHub GitHub desktop directory is just automatically placed when I downloaded it into my documents folder. So my GitHub folder, this is the folder that contains all of the things that I have up on GitHub. And you can see this Hack Week, that's what I just added. So I'm just going to be very explicit about this, and I'm going to call this file alphane speed.
You'd want to put it also in the hack directory.
Right.
And generally we put it in a subdirectory of that, but for the moment,
Yeah. Sorry, I meant one more step. So just to be clear, this is the full. This is all the everything else here is basically things to make it run correctly. But all of the code is going to go into hack. So Alphane speed, good.
Yes.
Okay, so I've saved this Alphane speed. Boy, my computer is being a little laggy here. I'm not quite sure why, but give it a second. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm not planning on reinventing the wheel here. So I'm going to really just pretend like I have this code written, and most likely the code that you're going to be contributing is code you've already written yourself for your own purposes. So all I'm really going to do here is I have in the documents what the Alphane speed is. I'm not going to have the same level of detail here because I want to just start simply. I want to get this equation in, recognizing that as I go along, I can always add more functionality. I can add more details to my data, to my code as I go along. So that's the documentation. You can get to that. This is the formulary documentation in Plasma Pi. You can get there at docs.plasmapi.org to see the actual code. At least how I try to see the actual code is by going to the actual Plasma Pi repository. Plasma Pi, it's under formulary, and then there's a Python file, a .py file called speeds. This has many different speeds in it, but I'm interested just in this Alphane speed. So you can help me, maybe direct me here, Nick, what you think would be the best. Like, for example, there's air handling and stuff that is in this function that I don't necessarily may not have to begin with. For example, like I don't worry so much about air handling when I'm coding up stuff for myself. So if I were writing my own code, I wouldn't necessarily have that in there.
For this function, I'd say the def Alphane speed line, and then the actual Alphane speed. So like return b over np.square-root.
Right. Okay.
And to simplify it, it could be have the density and assume that is like a mass density, for example.
Sorry, say that again.
So we could have B and density as the two inputs.
Right. So I'm gonna remove ion and zme.
Yeah.
For now.
And I think so there are also annotations in there. We shouldn't have to worry about those yet.
Right. I should note now when I'm creating a file, I need all of the imports and stuff right up here. I should have started there. Some of this stuff, header stuff is not necessary yet, right? We can get that added in after the fact. And that's again where some of this stuff can be, you can do after the fact, after you learn a bit more how to incorporate, and so that you sort of do that naturally, or you can work with one of the developers and say, oh, we need to add some of these headers to make it a little bit more streamlined into the Plasma Pi. Is someone watching the chat? Just I see that there's things come up. Maybe Eric, can you keep an eye on that and let me know if there are questions that should be answered right away? or Nick, I guess.
Right.
Okay, so for this, we really only need NumPy and AstroPy units.
Right.
Okay, so I have Alphane speed, I have B field in units of Tesla, and I have density in units of inverse meters cubed, I assume, or inverse kilograms per meters cubed.
Right. So for this one, I think deleting the U.M per cube would be, or the first one before the comma.
Ah, so we're assuming a mass density as opposed to a particle density.
Yeah.
Okay, and then let's see, then I don't need another parentheses. Now this notation here this is an AstroPy
right.
units notation, but it doesn't seem to. I'm just for ease of things, I'm gonna just make this all one line. So I have B in Tesla, density in, oh, maybe the issue is here. I'm not quite sure what I'm missing that's causing this to.
It might be that the function there isn't anything on the next line.
Ah, okay, so let me add the return, the function.
A cheat way you can do,
Mhm.
you don't get the error right away. If you just put 3 dots underneath the Alphane speed, that basically acts like a pass.
Like that?
Yeah, and so it won't complain until you get more stuff in there.
Except it's still complaining, but
because you need a blank line at the end of the file.
Ah, got it. Okay.
And then get rid of the spaces. Yep.
So that's just the placeholder for my function.
Yeah.
Okay. So just real quick, this remind me, this notation for AstroPy units is just is it enforcing that the result will be in these units, or is it just a note saying that it should be?
The way it's written, it's a reminder.
Okay.
So there are decorators that we might end up using, or that we will end up using, that do enforce the units.
So
and
that
make sure the units are correct. But as it's written, it's a hint, a type hint.
Got it. So that that code in particular is not necessary for functionality.
At this moment, no.
Got it. Okay, I will leave it in, but just making note of that. That's really just a flag for future versions.
Right.
It's called type hinting.
Okay.
And type hinting, what it does is it tells you what the expected type is from the return of that function. And at the moment, and what would happen is in your IDE, if something were to return, if you were to get to the end of your function and not return something of that type, the IDE will let you know.
Oh, okay.
But if you were to run it, Python will not necessarily throw an error message because it's a hint. It's not strict typing like C++, C++, or Fortran.
Right. Okay.
And I think probably it'd be better to type out the Alphane speed equation fresh, since
there
are some like complications with regards to, is it number density or is it mass density that this code has. But we want to keep this straightforward.
Right. So here, these are type errors here. This is just you're returning the value. I mean, you're calculating it right on the return line here. Yes.
Right.
So I could just, for now, return In this case, I want the absolute value of b divided by square root of, I didn't, well, mu naught is defined, is in astropy units, yes? And I think that
astropy.constants.
Right.
So there should be a line at the top that says, let's see.
Yeah, here it is. Okay, so I need this line, additional line here, if I'm gonna follow along in the same style. You don't have to, but I guess when we're talking about coding in Plasma Pi, it's probably best to incorporate astropy units and astropy constants as much as you can ahead of time, just so that there's less to have to go back and fix. Okay, so I have my mu naught defined here, so it's mu naught times my density rho, which I defined over here. So here is where what we were just talking about, because we got rid of the particle density version. So in principle, I should be able to just write density here instead of rho, because there's no modification in terms of ion type, right?
Right.
Okay. So for now, I'm just gonna,
There's a typo. It should be mu0. Perfect.
okay. Why is this complaining that it's not being used? Oh, it's just complaining that KB is not being used, but we're not using KB. So actually, I'm gonna get rid of that. I'm just gonna import mu naught, because I think KB is for another function further along, like the sound speed or something like that. Okay, so that's the function. So at this point, Nick, does it make sense to go ahead and, well, I want to pause and see, is there any, there's a petition, inverse square root algorithm.
I wonder if that's what numpy.square root does. I don't know, but
I was joking about that, just to be clear, but that is interesting. I wonder if it does use that algorithm.
Yeah, I'm just looking into that now.
All right.
It definitely uses the squared, the optimized squared algorithm.
All right, that's beyond me. I just want a square root. However it does it, works for me. Okay, so at this point, Nick, what makes the most sense here? Would I go ahead and say, okay, I want to add this functionality to my forks, my branches and forks, and then push it. And then maybe when I do the pull request, we can demonstrate saying, well, maybe you should add something here, and then I go back and change it. Does that sound good?
Sure.
In more documentation.
Yeah. I usually do this through the command line. Was that what you were thinking of doing?
I was going to do it how I do it, which was most of the way I've interacted with code review has been through, well, doing all of this has been through either GitHub Desktop and then on GitHub. So maybe I'll go through what I would do, and you can point out differences.
Okay.
So
did you intend to have a typo in there, David? Is that part of your?
Where did you,
do I have a typo?
PhD, David?
What was that?
Where did you get your PhD? Did we let you out not knowing this?
What is my typo?
Let Nick point it out in the review.
Sure.
I think.
I'm wondering where my typo is.
Or if you want to cheat, read the chat.
Oh, okay.
All right, I'll play dumb and not look at the chat for now. Okay, but
it's actually a good lesson, so I think it's great.
Yeah, we did this totally on purpose.
Okay, so what I would do now is I have this. I'm going to go back to my GitHub, my GitHub desktop. And let's see, this is saved. So when I go back to GitHub desktop, there should be local changes. Yes, there it is. Okay, so there's the changes. It's adding this function. So I'm going to call this commit add initial alphane speed function. Okay, so I gave it some names, commit name, description. I'm going to go ahead and commit that. So I'm committing it to my branch. It's taking a moment. All right. Now, I can do one of two things, right? I guess in this case, I want to keep the branch separate because I'm still going to be modifying this as I go along. So here I will go ahead and push this to the origin remote, meaning that I'm going to update my GitHub account with the change to that specific branch. I'm not going to merge my branch into my main. Yes, Nick?
I think if you push origin, that will push the branch to origin.
Will it?
Oh, it should.
Yeah, it will update your GitHub. Because you've already pushed it once, it already exists there. So this will just update what you already have on GitHub.
Right, but it's going to only update it to the alphane, like it's not going to change.
It's not going to touch main at all, no.
Right. Okay, and that's what I want because I want to keep this branch sort of separate for now until it sort of had some more iterations. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to push this to origin and we'll go back to see that change has been updated on here. As soon as it finishes pushing. Okay, so it's finished pushing. Now, let me look here. And you can see I updated my branch 2 minutes ago. So my branch has now in hack alphane speed as coded up with whatever error I have because I got my PhD from a crappy school. I blame Troy Carter.
We all make mistakes.
Okay, so at this point, I'm sort of done with, for now, I'm done with sort of local stuff. It's on my remote. It's on my remote, main. Now here's where I might need a little bit of guidance here, Nick, on what to do. So the next step would be to, I'd like to push this, create a pull request so that the code reviewers, the main, people who will look at this can check this and see if it has any, whatever needs updating.
So at the top, there is a banner that is showing up that says compare and pull request on the right. And that's a really helpful thing that GitHub does.
Okay.
So if you click on that, since you had a single commit, it's putting that commit as the pull request message, which works.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it helps to have some description of what the change is and why you're making it, and if there's anything else that people reviewing the pull request would find helpful.
So I will do that. I'll say adding an initial Alphane speed function. And I'll say I added a simple function for calculating the Alphane speed given magnetic field, Tesla, and density in kilograms per meter cubed. Okay. Now here's where it's this section here that I always sort of want to make sure that I'm doing correctly. So I'm asking, my pull request is for the Plasma Pi Hack Week main, and it's coming from my repository, but specifically this branch, the add Alphane speed.
Right.
So this is all correct, yes?
If you click on the thing from the banner, it automatically gets put up there correctly.
Okay. Because I could do other, like I could at this point just merge it to my own origin or create a pull request to get it merged to my own, you know, this would be the process of merging that branch into my my remote main.
Right. So one way to look at this, so it's the line with the buttons that says base repository Plasma Pi / Hack Week base main.
Yes.
There is an arrow that is pointing from the head repository, your own repository, and that branch to the left into the base repository. So that arrow is the direction that the code change is going to make.
Right. Okay.
And from the perspective of Plasma Pi / Hack Week, the base repository, you're asking that repository to pull in the changes that you're making.
Got it. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I think that I have everything that I want to do, and I'm going to go ahead and create pull request. And there we go.
Awesome.
So now it's on to Nick's side.
All right.
So Nick, are you gonna show your what you would do on your end?
Yes.
Or okay, so should I stop sharing?
Right.
For now.
Okay. And so this should be showing up. Font size okay?
Looks
All
good.
right. So this is the Plasma Pi / Hack Week repo. And if I click under pull requests, so there are 3. There are a couple now.
Real quick, Nick, real quick, just a quick question. Who has access to be able to do what you're doing right now?
Anyone.
How is that set? Anyone can access because it's public.
Right.
That's
so
no.
Yeah, all of this is public right now. So I'm going to click on David's pull request. I'm glad that the slides for the talk are getting added. And in it, it has the thing that David wrote. And right now, it has some checks haven't completed yet. And the one that it's doing is for building the documentation. And that's something which we don't have to worry about too much yet. So if I go to commits, it will show the changes that David made, the commit messages. And if I click on the ... there is some more information about what David was doing. And under files changed, it will show the files that were changed. So it's like a good name to the tab. And since it was pointed out in the chat, there's a typo in this. And so if I hover over the boundary between the line number and the added line, I can click a plus sign there. And as it stands, I could type in a message that should be star instead of slash. Or I could delete that and click on this plus and minus button, and it will allow me to make a suggestion directly. And so I could change this, and then I could either add a single comment or start a review. And in this case, I'm going to start a review. So, and then the other change would be plus and minus that since we're in Python 3, this is no longer needed. I'll add the review comment. And so this is another suggestion to remove that line because it's only needed for Python 2 and not Python 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll click on finish my review. And in this case, I'm requesting some changes. And I'll say, looking pretty close. Thank you for making this contribution. And then I'll do a cat face because cat faces are awesome and needed. And I'll submit the review. And then I'll stop sharing, and David, it can go back to you.
Okay. All right, so let's see. I'm very, very confident that I did this all correctly the first time around. So I'm gonna go see, oh, so now I see, okay. In my pull request, Nick is, what? Requested changes. This is why, this is some reviewer too that is going on here.
But the cat face emoji helps, right?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit, softens the blow a little bit.
What about looking at your notifications too, your GitHub notifications?
Where are my notifications? Yeah. Yeah, so I got a notification that that there was a comment on, there was some code review done. So I've gone there, said, okay, looking pretty close. Yeah, that's the correct thing. So I could do one of two things, right? I could go back into my code and make that change myself, or I can just say, yeah, you're right. I made a mistake in my math. So I would say, okay, I'm going to commit change. And so that's one change. Since this is no longer needed, I'm going to delete. I could also, again, I could go back into my code and upload, change that. I wonder, can I do both? Can I do both make changes here? Is that like a separate commit?
If you click under the commit suggestion thing, the arrow, I think it's only.
Well, basically, I wanted to show both ways. I wanted to show, yes, the change that you made, that one change was correct, or I agree on that. But let's say I wanted to go back to my original code in Spider. And so I don't need this line.
If you do that, what could end up happening is that you'll have to resolve conflicts because your remote will now be out of sync with your local.
So maybe why don't I just stay with these, basically the committing the suggestions in GitHub, and maybe if there's another round of changes that need to be made.
I mean, I'd almost show the process of making a change here and making a change local. So you have to resolve updating your local branch.
Okay. So I've made one commit there. And I'm going to say, oh yes, I'm going to delete this in my original code. Okay, now if I go to where's my GitHub? Okay, so now there is change, or there should be change in a second here. Now that change that I made in by committing this, should I go through and just
Sorry, I missed it. Did you delete the UTF-8 line locally already?
Yes.
Okay. And so if you go to GitHub desktop, have you committed that?
I have not committed it yet because it
hasn't shown up yet.
Yeah.
So this is always a good time to do a fetch. Oh, sorry. Go back to your Spider. I think I know why it hasn't shown up yet. Go back to Spider. Am I right or am I wrong? I might be wrong. I thought you might not have saved the file. Remember, in Spider, it won't show up in the Git until you save it.
Right. No, I saved it. Well, here it's
there
up.
It is.
Okay. So I'm going to say getting rid of UFT8 line. The origin.
So what you didn't point out there though is up here, up in the top for a split second, right up here. You see, you have two with an up arrow. That means you have, before you did the poll, there was one up arrow and one down arrow. And that was indicating that there's a change up high on GitHub and there's a change locally. Now, if you had tried to push, GitHub didn't even give you the option to push. It only gave you the option to pull.
Right.
So it's kind of preempting you. But
got
if
it.
you tried
Yeah,
to push,
I recognize that.
Yeah, if you tried to push, it would have been refused. So now that he pulled, he has all the changes from up on GitHub in his local copy.
So basically, there's two separate commits that I'm trying to push. One is my local commit, and one is the commit that I agreed to, that Nick's suggestion. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when I push origin, it's basically going to satisfy both of those commits.
I think if there's a suggestion that comes up on GitHub and you agree with it, it's usually less work to accept the suggestion than to make the change again on your own computer.
Now, but what's important to note though is that when so I made the change here, but I made the change on the remote. So when I go back to my local code, I need to make sure that I pull. I need to fetch and get everything in line, and that's what Eric was pointing out, was that it sort of did that automatic, like it it made sure that that was that was done properly in the first place. Okay, so to close this, or at least to continue this, I need to say that, yes, I made those changes. Because I'm still in this, mode of needing to comment. Oh, here, I see here, never mind, it's been updated here. So here are the two changes
David,
that were made.
What you would do now, since you've satisfied everything, if you scroll up, back up to the top, in the top right corner, you see Nick's name. You want to hit that little, let me get the annotations back. Yes, right there.
Yeah.
You want to re-request a review. And so that will ping Nick to look at it again.
Got it. Okay. So if I hit that.
No, that part.
Circle things.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's it, right? So now this will go back to Nick.
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
Nick, you want to switch back to you and see what you would see on your side?
Yeah. So, I'm just happening along and I see the other pull request. And so this is for the slides for the lightning talk. I'll say, awesome. Thank you for adding these. And then we can squash and merge. And so the lightning slide talks are now up there. And now, oh, there is a notification for me. And this is David again. And let's see what is up.
Nick.
And so I can go back
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
files changed. And look at it again. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. So I'm going to go to review changes and say LGTM, which is short for looks
Hey,
good
Nick,
to me.
you had a question coming in.
Oh,
Yes, for those of us that are relatively new to Git, what is a squash?
okay. When we accept a pull request, there are a couple of different ways that we can do it. The first way would be a merge commit, where every commit that was made on the branch gets added to the history of the repository. A squash merge is when we take all the commits and change them into a single commit. And so in this case, it ends up helping to make the history of the repository a bit cleaner, though you do end up losing some information.
So basically the fact that I made a multiplication or a division instead of multiplication is not going to be in the record of Plasma Pi, so that my mistake is forever hidden. But if you had just merged the entire branch, then that transaction, those conversations would still be there. Is that correct, Nick?
The changes, if one were to go back to the pull request, then we can see the history there. So the history of the changes is still around, but we'd have to look at the pull request specifically in order to see what what happened.
It wouldn't list it explicitly in the Plasma Pi commit list.
Right. And yeah, but that's fine. We all make mistakes, and Eric and I have definitely made our own share. So probably like half of my commits are fixing the error that I caused in my previous commit. So it's natural.
One of the things that your question brings up, Vincent, is that one of the behaviors that's recommended in Git is to commit often, and you know, at least once a day, but you know, honestly, even more frequently than that. And you know, when you get to when you get to that, that'll just help you with your own code. And then when you do the pull requests, the history of the changes that we're making is there, so you can actually trace your thought process or your editing. So committing often is not a bad behavior.
Right.
Yeah,
And I would argue that the utility of Squash is to help, shall we say, fold under all the detail of the back and forth and just keep the primary logs relevant to bigger changes.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's some occasions where one style or another ends up working a lot better. But for the most part, it's a matter of preference. So we usually do squash merges.
Yeah, I'll say it, if you go to the commit history in GitHub, since we do squash merges in Plasma Pi, basically every commit step is a squash merge, but it links directly back to the pull request that it came from. So as you mentioned, it's basically we're keeping our commit history from getting polluted by folding all that into that single commit message, and you can still go back to the pull request to see all the gory details.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right. So you've already squashed and merged, right?
That was the pull request with the slides for the
right.
lightning talk.
Right.
Um,
So now you're about to look through this and decide whether this needs more review or not.
right. And in this case, I'll say, I was going to say looks good to me. And then I was trying to figure out which emoji to add. And I think I'll do first place medal and then more cats. And then I clicked on approve, and where you probably weren't able to see it was a button for submit review. And so looks good to me. First place cat. And I'll let you go back to this, David.
All right. And so what do I see? I'll look at my notifications. All right, this is the last notification. Looks good. So now in principle, I have the power, because this is a public version, to squash and merge, right? But normally,
No.
what?
No.
What?
So you have to have be added to the repository or to the organization in order to do the squash and merge.
Got it.
You're able to do that because we added you at some point in the last.
Right. Okay. So this is a little bit deceptive, because I'm technically, I've been given the ability to squash and merge, but normally I wouldn't. And so what would that look like, I guess?
If that was the case, then the reviewer would have been the one to click squash and merge.
You could have just done it instead of just closing your comment. You could have just said, okay.
Right. And if you click on the right green arrow thing pointing down there, it has the other possibilities. And in this case, we don't have the other ones enabled.
Got it.
And so we can squash and merge. We usually let the person who made the pull request merge it themselves if they have the permissions in the repository, because there might be something like, oh, I was going to add this other thing that I forgot. So this helps.
I see. So I before I did this, I'd have like if I said, oh, I really should have added a little bit of documentation, I can go and do that. But then wouldn't that changing that send that back to you?
Mhm.
Okay.
So
Usually,
I was going to say another thing you can do since a lot of contributors won't have the power to merge themselves, and so we'd end up merging it for you. If you are still working on it and you don't want it merged, David, cancel this real quick. And if you scroll up to the top, and right underneath Nick's name where it says reviewers, you see still in progress, click draft. So you can convert it to draft.
Yeah.
So go ahead, you can go back and forth. So go ahead and do it. And you see that the symbol in the top left corner, just under the title, has now changed to draft. So that's an indication to us you're still working on it. You don't want it merged yet.
Right.
And
so that could be a situation where like I want to get some code review, but I just want to get some feedback, but I'm still basically building things into it.
You can still request code review while it's reviewed, but generally we will not look at a draft pull request until they either change it to ready for view or they go ahead and add one of us as a reviewer.
Got it.
Because then we'll get the notification that you're requesting a review.
Okay.
And then to change it back right there at the bottom, go up a little bit. Right there. You see it now, it says ready for review.
Okay. Well, just for the sake of efficiency, let me go ahead and just merge this. You can see that the checks have all passed. I'm going to squash and merge, confirm. And then it's going to close the pull request and indicate that it's been merged.
At this point, it's also usually good to delete the branch. For every pull request, it helps to have a separate branch. And in the, there is, David, if you go ahead and click delete branch, there is a button where you can restore the branch. So the history of the branch is not lost. And you can get it back. So deleting it helps keep GitHub clean.
All right, so I'm done. And now if I go back to, so let's go back to.
So Nick, you have a question. Now that you've merged one pull request for the Alphane speed and there's a whole bunch more open up, what are you going to do?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think in this case, if the, look at Steve's, if the file.
Do you want to share your screen?
That would probably help, wouldn't it?
I was just going to make the comment that now I'm going to go, I'm not showing it, but I'm going to go back to my GitHub, my GitHub desktop, and I should see that there's been like that branch has been, when I fetch the origin, I should lose the branch, right? It'll have been deleted.
The branch on GitHub will have been deleted, but not, I don't think on your local computer unless GitHub desktop does something.
Well, I'm going to see. So I'm fetching the origin. Oh, that's right. Because well, I guess I'll find out and see what happens. But I'll let you know so you can continue.
Okay. So if I go to a different one where there ends up being a file that has the same name, these look like they were capitalized, so I don't think that there is a direct conflict. But at the bottom, there would be something that says there's a conflict, and that you can't merge yet. So if they're doing the same thing, then I'd usually say, oh, we just merged this other pull request, which was doing this. And then close the new ones that were conflicting. So. All right.
So just to go back to mine, now in my local repository, I have the option again to publish my branch. So it's been deleted from my remote, but it still exists in my local, but it's unpublished basically.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. And so that's the process. Let's see there. I think if there's anything else that we wanted to make sure to bring up. I think that's pretty close to everything. Yeah. Yes, it's fun to hear the babies and little children in the background.
Yeah, fun.
Not as many cats this time. Okay, so there's another question. So we now start pushing into the GitHub repo. So we would be pushing into our own forks usually, and then later on we can do the pull request to pull them in. I'm not sure which GitHub repo you were talking about, the base one or our fork.
And when you say our fork, you're meaning our individual forks, correct?
Correct. Yes.